Welcome back to Fantasy Sports Today here on SportsGrid. It's our supersized edition of Fantasy Sports Today. Craig Mish, Joe Pisapia, George Kurtz, Matt Stryker. Welcome back to the show. All right, show of hands here, folks. Show of hands. How many of us have had a cup of coffee before the show? Show of hands. Who has had a cup of coffee before the show? Only me? I'm the only one? Is this possible?
I had a tea this morning, Craig. I'm on a health kick. My little lemon tea with honey there, the old vocal cords getting up there. So
he's got his Pepsi, right?
I don't drink coffee. I don't like coffee.
Stryker, how are you going to get through this day? This is a lot for you, man. Show, Super Bowl.
I had a muffin that was half destroyed, and I have some water off camera here.
All right. A little surprising. I guess I'm the only coffee guy here on the show. All right. Show of hands. How many of us have bet on 10 or more Super Bowl props already? Show of hands. One. Just Wimps. George. Okay. All right.
I got enough for all of us. That's fine. We're going to average 10.
All right. Fair enough. Matt Stryker. Show of hands. Smash or pass. Anytime touchdown. Saquon Barkley. -190, Matt Stryker. I'll start with you.
I'll give you half a hand.
Half a hand. You go like halfway there.
Yeah.
Matt. How can it look? There's got to be better bets on the board the last day of the season than bet a -190, right? Like even if this is going to happen, we got to find something else here.
So that's why it's half a hand here, is that it's paired with a Travis Kelce anytime touchdown. It's paired with an insert here because -190 is egregious. And George, you made a great point. You have enough for all of us. I think the lesson here overall is throughout the season, we want to be playing with the house money. There's no way in the world that we should be sweating, -190, because at this point, we should have done well enough that we're just, playing with fun stuff here with Monopoly money. So that's why you look at something like this. The book also says that there's a whole public that's going to go, -190, is that good? Yeah, sure, Mom, it's great. You get the point? So you pair Barkley with something else. I didn't mean to disparage anyone's mother.
Yeah, Joe, I personally think I've talked about this all week long here on SportsGrid. I think, and we'll show Jalen Hurts' prop here, anytime touchdown, -115. I just feel like this is so much of a better prop than Barkley if you're going to lay minus money. I've seen some people pairing this together, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think if that's the case, it's going to require Barkley to run in a longer touchdown here. But so many people are on this one, and that's what makes me nervous.
Well, the Saquon thing is interesting because if you go in the regular season, he had 13 rushing touchdowns, right? He had 5 games where he scored 2, and then he had just 3 where he scored 1. The rest were zeros, right? So interesting there from the rushing standpoint. You actually should, if you're going to be looking at Saquon Barkley, it might be more advantageous for you to look at the score 2+ touchdowns at +250. Because if he's going to do it, there's a better chance, more 2-1, that he's going to do it more than once in that game. But I'm with you. Jalen Hurts, if you're just betting a single touchdown prop, just makes all the sense of the world. We know who this team is. They're going to grind, get closer to the goal line, and then they're just going to punch it in there. It's what they've done for the last 3 years. So it's kind of strange. It's like, what do you know that I don't when it comes to betting this? But I think with Saquon, if you want to get in on him, that -190 is just ridiculous. So I think you're better off either, if you think the Eagles are going to win, just going straight to the MVP for Saquon Barkley, because he would be that guy, I think, that would win that MVP. Or you're looking for multiple touchdowns with that MVP. You're writing a story, you're writing a narrative here for Barkley if you think he has multiple touchdowns, and that's him being MVP and the Eagles winning that game.
All right, so George, pass or smash here. Let's go to some plus money Eagles props here, and then we'll do the Chiefs coming up. A.J. Brown, I'll start with you on A.J. Brown. He's +180, a very quiet end of the season, a very quiet playoffs until the last game. Imagine if Brown does not have a big game in the NFC Championship. This number would have been +250. It's +180 off the strength of the previous game.
Yeah, now, I'm of the belief I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game. All right, I've got it at 24-20, which means 5 touchdowns in the game. I guess you could argue 6. They missed an extra point here, but I got 3 touchdowns for the Eagles, and I think Hurts is getting one. I think Barkley's getting one. So there's only one extra one to go there. I also wonder how the Chiefs are going to play this. Are they going to put McDuffie on Brown? Go 1-1 there? Are they going to try and bracket Brown and maybe put McDuffie on Devonta Smith? What about stopping Barkley? So I think Brown's going to have a decent game. I don't think he'll be quiet. I don't think it's going to be a big game either. So what did you use? Word smash or pass? I'm going to pass on Brown. I don't think I have any for the 33 props I have. I don't think I have any on AJ Brown.
All right, so plus 180, Matt, for AJ Brown, plus 230 for Devonta Smith. So I'll throw, Matt, both of those at you. Pass or smash on Brown, pass or smash on Smith. Let's go to the receivers on Philadelphia.
So George set it up perfectly with Brown, with a scenario that could happen where Brown finds himself in one-on-one man coverage, and Brown's numbers are good against that. So you could try to drill down on that, to use someone else's term, to find that plus money. And then Joe is mentioning how that middle of the field is sometimes vulnerable, and perhaps that could lend itself to a guy like Devonta Smith with higher money. I'm really into pairing, though. George brings it up. He only sees 3 touchdowns to go around. I like to parlay these things and find good plus money. I'm playing with someone else's money here.
All right, so Smith is plus 230, Joe. AJ Brown is plus 180. And Joe, the most bet player in the Super Bowl, as far as the props are concerned, it seems like it's Dallas Goedert. Now, I know that you never know on a touchdown, and he's plus 320, but you can't tune into a show or listen to a Super Bowl podcast of any kind without hearing that Goddard is going to have more than 45 or 50 yards this week. I just wonder if you cash in on the touchdown too.
Yeah, this is the fantasy nerds coming out here betting this one, because the Chiefs have struggled against tight ends this year. There's no doubt about it. They're one of the worst teams in the league at defending the tight end position. And Dallas Goedert, part of this offense. It's not a bad return. I mean, 3-1 is pretty good, but I'm kind of where George is, where I think you're getting a lot of these touchdowns on the ground. I don't see them going over 30 points. So if that's the case, where are these other touchdowns coming from? I think somebody's going to have multiple between Hurts and Barkley, which means one other guy. I think Devonta Smith might be the happy medium there, and you're getting a pretty good, more than 2-1 return on him. So I would lean towards Devonta Smith there just to get loose in the middle of that field in that slot, which is the same thought process with Goddard. And I think some people might get really frustrated there thinking it's going to be Goddard, but instead you're getting Smith working in that slot, doing the same sort of damage. So not every team, not every offense runs the same way, but I think if you're looking right now to attack the Chiefs, once again, it's kind of similar to what you're talking about on the flip side with the Eagles. You're attacking the middle of the football field. Dallas Goedert on paper makes a lot of sense, but to me, you're putting this game in the hands of Hurts and Barkley first and foremost, and that to me is the heaviest. So look for the anytime touchdown on Hurts. I'm all in on that. Maybe the first touchdown score for Barkley. Maybe you do the double up there with Barkley too if he has that big game. So I think there's a lot of ways to still make money on some of these touchdown props, but with guys like Barkley, you're going to have to just be more clever.
George, did you get in on any of these plus money Eagles, anytime touchdowns or first touchdowns? And maybe, look, there are other players on the Eagles that we're not discussing here. Very big long shots, by the way, on all of them. Gainwell would be another one, too. Did you take a shot on any of them?
I think it was Cam last night. It was big on I think it was 2,000-1. Calcaterra getting an anytime touchdown. So good luck, Cam, there. I do have props in some way. Like I said, Barkley got his prop. I also got him to Barkley to score a touchdown and the Eagles to win. I'm on Goddard, and I thought I was ahead of the curve here. And then everybody in their mother's betting Goddard now. But I have him in a few different ways as well there. And I have Devonta Smith. I think Joe put it perfectly. He might be that happy medium guy. And you look at his numbers against the type of defense that Kansas City runs. They're big numbers here, so I think Devonta Smith could have a big game as well. So yeah, I'm on Devonta Smith as well here. It's just AJ Brown, right? And it's really not anybody else on Philadelphia other than Brown, Smith, Goddard to worry about there. It's just AJ Brown that I'm not going to be playing on all that much today. I do wonder if McDuffie follows him wherever he goes.
Saquon Barkley's rushing prop climbed to 124 in the previous game that he played in. That number has come back down to 111. Me and the guys will talk about whether he goes over or under that prop in the Super Bowl. You're watching Fantasy Sports Today. We'll have it for you next.
It's finally here. The big game is just days away. And SportsGrid is live from New Orleans all week long, bringing you the latest news, insights, and analysis from the biggest names in the game. And on game day, we've got you covered all day long with expert picks, live odds, and everything you need to make the most out of the biggest game of the year. Don't miss a second, and it's all happening only on SportsGrid.
Best dressed guy, let me tell you, next to me in terms of Radio Row. I want to get your thoughts quickly on the game, Philly and KC. How do you see it playing out?
You know, obviously you got Patrick Mahomes, who just finds a way to win. Then you got on the other side of the table an alien, and Barkley. I mean, he's had an incredible year.
Right.
I think whoever has the balls last is going to win the football game.
Only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
There are a lot more. All right, welcome back to Fantasy Sports today here on SportsGrid. The most electrifying player on the field is going to be Saquon Barkley. He's the big focus going into the Super Bowl on Sunday. And as I mentioned just before the break, he had the highest individual rushing prop for any player since sports betting was legalized about 6 years ago. Now, that number has come down a little bit because you would assume the Kansas City Chiefs are a better defensive team than what Barkley has faced thus far in the playoffs. In fact, as we take a look at his rushing number, gentlemen, it is 111.5. I have seen this number all over the place throughout the week. 114, 109. I think we're settled here somewhere around a 111.5. But again, check your sports book, whether it's FanDuel, MGM, DraftKings, somewhere else. Basically, the juice is the same, minus 110, minus 112. There's really, honestly, not a lot of difference when you're talking about 2 cents in that spot. George, I'll start with you on this one. 111.5 yards for Barkley. George, if you're just joining us, has made it sort of clear, just so everyone understands before you bet these, that George is leaning on Philadelphia to win the Super Bowl here. But does that mean necessarily that Barkley goes over this prop?
I don't think he has to go over for him to win it. I think if he does, they have won it, because that probably means they're killing time in the second half. Yeah, he's hit some big plays as well. But I don't think he has to get over this number. Listen, 80 yards plus, they'll have a pretty good shot here. It's a small play on the over. I just don't think you're going to win money betting the under on this either. He's hit these big plays all season long. I do think this is where the in-game betting comes in, by the way. I expect, at least in the first quarter, for the Chiefs to try and take him out or keep him in check. So that safety's going to crawl down here, get in the box. He's going to see some 8-man boxes. If Kurtz is going over the top and he's beating that kind of defense, then they're going to have to back off. And then you can really hammer this number as things will open up for Barkley here. That's where the in-game betting comes in. Let's see what they do here. I said for Barkley, I think he's going to get it, but it's a smaller bet. It's not one of my bigger bets here. I do like his over 23.5 for his longest run here, his anytime touchdown. One Barkley bet I like a lot that we haven't discussed, 12.5 receiving yards. I have to think he crushes this. All right, I have to think that maybe that's part of the game plan here. If he can't run the ball, let's get the ball out of the backfield here. We'll flip him out, pass him the flat, and we'll get his yardage that way here. So I love that bet.
All right, that's, by the way, currently 13.5 on FanDuel. But, Joe, let me go back to you. And then, Matt, same question here. Barkley, 111.5. Are you over or under this? Joe, I'll start with you.
I'm going to go under this one, Craig. And I know that's probably going to surprise a lot of people because typically I'm over on the Saquon stuff. It's hard not to be because he's been so spectacular. But let's take a look at the second half of the season here for Barkley. He faced the Washington Commanders 3 times, a team that has struggled enormously against the run all season against everybody. Carolina Panthers were in that group, right? Another team you can run on them all day. The Dallas Cowboys, a team that basically effectively quit. He got 167 on them. And we all know the story about when Saquon faces the Rams, what happens, right? So all these numbers are really impressive. But if you dial back to week 15 and week 13 against two teams that are really good against the run, who are those teams? Baltimore, Pittsburgh, right? All year, good against the run, good up front. He was well under this number in both of those games. So I think it might be a little bit closer to that 100 century mark than it is getting into that 110. Now, of course, we know Saquon's capable of breaking one out there, but I think we have a weird sense here when we're looking at trends, but we're not looking close enough at the opponents in those trends. And I think that's something that we're not taking into enough stock where everybody's just automatic over. I'm not.
All right, Matt, do you have a play on this opinion at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a smart take by Joe, because if you just look at the game log, you'll see that he generally goes over this number, but you have to look at the quality of opponent. 2 cents to the under isn't anything to sneeze at. It's telling you that that's the way it's going to go. So I'm leaning that way. But to marry what Joe and George said, maybe we can try to find all-purpose yards, because I do believe that they're going to have to try to use Barkley just slightly differently, Kirk.
All right. Now, as far as the rushing attempts, 21.5 on Barkley. Heavy lean toward the over here at minus 124. Joe, the under is minus 105. And so the idea that Philadelphia goes into this game and competes is through Barkley's rushing attempts. If you've watched the Chiefs play at all this season, irrespective of how many yards Joe Barkley gets, the Chiefs play close games. That means Barkley still runs. He could have 21.5 rushing attempts and only have 80 or 90 yards. Very possible in this game. I suppose that's why the lean is a little juicy on the over, minus 124.
Yeah, I mean, that Pittsburgh game, he had 19, right? So he was right around that number, but still was under. So you're talking about an opportunity here. Even in the Baltimore game where he was under that rushing total, he had 23 carries. So I do believe that you are looking at something where it's probably going to be get Saquon the football here, 20 plus attempts. I'm with George, though. I do think you got to get him the football out in space a little bit, too, especially if you start to struggle there up front with him. But I actually do think you're looking at still on the under here. I think it's more like 19 or 20. I mean, 21.5, I mean, unless you're getting to an overtime situation, I think that's going to be trickier.
George, over to you for this.
I don't see how he doesn't get this, unless it's a blowout and they're throwing the football left and right here. I'm on the Eagles. I think they're going to win the game. So I think in the second half, they're going to be looking to run the ball. Kenneth Gainwell is not seeing the field unless Barkley's out of breath. All right. This is not a regular season game. This is not week 12. All right. We're going to give Gainwell a series here, a series there. This is the Super Bowl. Barkley's in this game here. Like I said, could it be where they're trailing in the second half and have to throw the football? Absolutely. I may be on the Eagles, but I don't think this is going to be a blowout for the Eagles. I don't. Although I do think that there is a blowout in this game, it will be Philadelphia, not Kansas City. But I don't see how he doesn't get this. You look at the games, he didn't get it. He got 15 attempts in a championship game, but that was a blowout. They took him out in the second half. Let's rest him here. Other than that, it's 26, 25, 31, 29. Joe already said he didn't get it versus Pittsburgh, 19. Didn't get it versus Carolina, 20. But those he missed by 1 and 2. All right, I can't see how if he doesn't get it, then I'm probably in a lot of trouble today, because I think that means he either got hurt or Kansas City put up a lot of points.
Yeah, probably. To me, it looks better, honestly, than the rushing total. I think George is right. I mean, look, the Chiefs are not going to blow out the Eagles. I mean, they've been blowing out anybody all season long. Matt, real quick, back over to you on the receptions. 2.5 for Barkley, over plus 140, under minus 181. Generally speaking, this is a good number. 2 is a good number for Barkley. Could he go over this, though? Plus 140.
The under's keeping me away the same way that the anytime touchdown number was keeping me away, although I do think it could happen. With regards to the rushing attempt, though, I do believe that those attempts are needed to create other situations. They're not always designed for progress, if that makes sense.
All right, fair enough. We'll take a quick break here on Fantasy Sports Today as we continue on. More props, more Chiefs, more Eagles. Don't go away.
It's finally here. The big game is just days away. And SportsGrid is live from New Orleans all week long, bringing you the latest news, insights, and analysis from the biggest names in the game. And on game day, we've got you covered all day long with expert picks, live odds, and everything you need to make the most out of the biggest game of the year. Don't miss a second, and it's all happening only on SportsGrid.
Even the great Nick Saban had to put his team together to do it his way. We know Coach Ryan's coming in to come run the offense, who was his right-hand man, a good friend of his at UW. And, now he's coming in. Everything is going the way we want this thing to be. Coach DeBoer is a great recruiter. He's a great father of players. He's a great leader of men. He's going to do great.
Only on SportsGrid.
It's the greatest show ever. It's funny, and you know what I like? You have balls. I mean, the stuff you do on that show, you are half crazy.
I feel like a good sense of humor, and I like to show it off. And this kind of originally started where people were, the hot dog eating challenge was something that I always wanted to do, and every 4th of July, and I was like, I could eat a ton of hot dogs.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back to Fantasy Sports today here on SportsGrid. If you've been watching our network for the majority of the week, you kind of get a sense for which props a lot of our hosts are on. And I mean, it's pretty much universal here, and not just here, but a lot of the other sports betting, talking heads, fair to say as well. We are 4 talking heads here on the show, by the way. And Joe, the one that seems to be getting the most attention here for both receiving yards and receptions, by the way, is Dallas Goedert on the strength of what he's done recently for the Philadelphia Eagles. His prop is 51.5 receiving yards. It was not 51.5. It opened up at 49.5, then 50, 51.5. And this is where it currently stands. A little bit of juice toward the over, not much. And then his receptions, which is another one that if you're watching people talk about betting on the Super Bowl, if they don't like Goddard's yards, they love his receptions over at 4.5. I mean, to me, this is like the most it's crazy, but the most talked about player prop, I think, from what I have seen going into the week. So we'll get all of the opinions of our panelists here on the show and our hosts. But let's start off with you, Joe, because you may have a different approach to Goddard going into tonight.
Yeah, fading the public here a little bit, and the public has actually gotten it right on paper, but we're talking about in practice now. So to quote Allen Iverson, we're talking about practice. This is what we're doing here. Let me tell you what we're doing here with Dallas Goedert, because the yardage is a good number. I understand the variable of this, and Matt, who does every show with me, knows that I'm somebody who likes to bet the yardage, because why? You have more variance with that. You have that one big play, you can maybe get it in one spot, right? But in this one, instead, I'm going to hyper-focus on something else here, which is I'm going to hyper-focus on the reception, something I rarely do, but instead I'm going to go the under, and here's why. He was injured for a few weeks, right? So he missed some time. Came back in week 10. Since week 10, he has gone over the 4.5 receptions how many times, folks? Twice. Those 2 times, both against the Washington Commanders. So just to put that out there, if you think it's a close game, if you think it's a grinding kind of situation there, then I don't see where this prolific, unless you're talking about this game going well over the over here, and we're talking about getting into a 35-31 kind of contest, I'd be shocked if Goddard gets the opportunity to get that many targets in this game. So for me, I'm actually going with the under there. Again, the only 2 times he went over this, against Washington twice, and that's a familiarity factor there too. That's an exposure factor, and Washington, we all know what kind of problems they had at times defensively this season. So I'm in the under category on this one, and I can't be shaken from it.
All right, Matt, let's go to you here on Goddard.
So let's imagine that I'm a wagerer coming in cold. I need to look at all of my information. Part of what I do is I look at where's the public going? Where's the public money? And when I see something like this, and then I start to tap into the talking heads, as you said, when I hear something like this, guys, I stay away. I just stay away because I don't want to sit there and be biting off that corner thumbnail, the one that always you pull down too far and it bleeds. I don't want to be doing that over something that I knew going in everyone else was on. That's always something I've always wanted to avoid. It's always repelled me. So I'm off of this completely based off of the fact that there's so much hype on it. I'll make my money elsewhere.
George?
Yeah, I said the same thing last night, Matt. Very similar. That I do like Goddard, all right, but everybody's on this, and that scares me a little bit. That all the public is on Goddard to have a big game here. I think he gets his reception total. The yards total, I think it's going to be a little tough. Kansas City, not good against tight ends, right? They were the 5th worst team against tight ends this year, so that maybe here. But I'm more of a Devonta Smith guy today, more than Goddard. They're going to run the same types of patterns here, so that's where I'm going to go with this. More Smith over Goddard, but I think it's going to be close. That being said, as you guys have both pointed out, you take out the Washington games, he doesn't get this. He just doesn't. So I'm probably going to stay away from it as well. I do have some Goddard bets here, plus 320 for an anytime touchdown. That's where probably my fave, because it's the best number I can find for one of their starting players here, even though touchdowns can be very finicky, to put it nicely.
Yeah, and look, what's happened in the past, the last couple of weeks, is the most dangerous thing to bet on, because the NFL, more than any other league in sports, is a week-to-week league. Yes, teams get hot. We've seen it before. Detroit laid an egg. Washington got hot, and I get it. But as far as the players and the props are concerned, if you're simply going off what you've seen the previous week, is a danger zone for betting on props, especially in the Super Bowl. When we come back next, we'll take a look at the quarterback on the Eagles. We'll go over his props as well. You're watching Fantasy Sports today here on SportsGrid. It is our Super Bowl supersized edition, and we'll be right back.
It's finally here. The big game is just days away, and SportsGrid is live from New Orleans all week long, bringing you the latest news, insights, and analysis from the biggest names in the game. And on game day, we've got you covered all day long, with expert picks, live odds, and everything you need to make the most out of the biggest game of the year. Don't miss a second, and it's all happening only on SportsGrid.
Even the great Nick Saban had to put his team together to do it his way. We know Coach Ryan's coming in to come run the offense, who was his right-hand man, a good friend of his at UW. And, now he's coming in. Everything is going the way we want this thing to be. Coach DeBoer is a great recruiter. He's a great father of players. He's a great leader of men. He's going to do great.
Only on SportsGrid.
It was the greatest show ever. It's funny, and you know what I like? You have balls. I mean, the stuff you do on that show, you are half crazy.
You know, I feel like a good sense of humor, and I like to show it off. And this kind of originally started where people were the hot dog eating challenge was something that I always wanted to do, and every 4th of July, and I was like, I could eat a ton of hot dogs.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to Fantasy Sports today here on SportsGrid. We're knocking out all of the Philadelphia Eagles props. We'll get to the Chiefs here coming up in just a minute, so don't despair. If you're only with us for a short period of time here on the show, you can always watch our show on demand over on YouTube. But, gentlemen, let's go back to the Eagles here. We'll go to a bunch of Jalen Hurts props, see if you like any of them, all of them, some, none. 213 is the passing yards number on Hurts with a little bit of a lean toward the under here. Hurts had a fantastic Super Bowl a couple of years ago. In fact, to the point that we thought we were going to be seeing these offensive numbers from Hurts for year after year, MVP after MVP. Went the other way last year. And this year he was fine. Don't make any mistake about it. He's a good player. Joe, I'll start with you. Good player, Jalen Hurts. But, I mean, I do look at the under here a little bit. I mean, it's just he's not, with Barkley there, he is not throwing the ball nearly as much. Injury status, he does seem to be fine. And I know that there's been a lot of focus on his rushing numbers in this game, but it does seem to me that 213 feels fair. A much higher number in the Super Bowl. People are looking toward that. Wait a second. How did he throw for 350 in the Super Bowl? Why is this number only 213?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going towards the under there too. Here we go again. We're going to bring back some game log action for you. He has gone over this number 3 times since week 10. Twice against who? Say it with me. The Washington Commanders. So I feel like maybe it's just the Commander stats that have us thinking the Eagles are a certain way. And that's also the last thing we saw, which is another dominant performance against a team that they were built to beat. You know, that familiarity factor with the teams in your division is very different. You know, some teams beat up on those teams in their division, others struggle, and it's very tight. We see sometimes that AFC North, those games get a little wacky between those teams that you're not anticipating necessarily, you know, the Steelers to lose to the Browns, right? But stuff like that happens sometimes. The other time he went over this was against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the interesting thing here is I'm with you. I feel like, if anything, I'm looking towards the under on this one because this is the Saquon Barkley show right now. And if you do have to consistently put the ball in Jalen Hurts' hands, it's not that he's not capable. Jalen Hurts is a winner. I don't want to take anything away from him because he does win a ton of games and he finds ways to win. I'm looking more for the rushing props on Jalen Hurts today than I am on the passing props. But I'm looking at the passing. I'm going to fade towards the under here because the trend line is, once again, that they're just not going to establish that sort of elite level passing game. Not to mention the Spags blitz is not going to give him a lot of time to throw the football.
Good point.
Let's go to George here first.
I can just parrot Joe. I agree with everything he said there. It's down to 211.5, by the way, on my book. So you can. Listen, I don't like taking unders. I'm an over guy. Most of us are over guys because you can win that bet early. Like, third quarter, it's over. Great, cash that. You know, but Joe brought up all the relevant stats. He generally doesn't hit this number. And I don't think this is going to be where he's trailing by multiple scores where he has to throw the football. You know, I expect Philadelphia to be in the lead or at least be a close game where you're keeping a normal game plan here. I also say this. I expect Philadelphia money to come in at some point. All right, where all these numbers are going to change here. So if you want to bet unders, I would wait closer to game time. I think you'll get better prices or better yardage where that might go to 213, 214 on my book, and you take the under there. So if you're going to take the under on Goddard or Hurts or whatever else we're going to talk about during the rest of the show, I would wait a few hours here to see if that Philadelphia money comes in.
All right. So far, Matt, we're 3 for 3 here on the under. You want to close it out?
Here's the thing. Let me pull back a curtain for you to make a point. When I was wrestling, a lot of times I'd wrestle guys. I'd say, hey, what are some things you don't normally do? Give me the things that you aren't known for because that's going to pop the crowd. I have the sneaking suspicion that perhaps the Eagles are preparing backwards. So look, you've done this the last 10 games. Clearly the other team is looking at that and preparing for you. Let's throw some things in. I think he has to go over. It's the Super Bowl. Everyone's watching. I have that kind of feel. So I'm going to break the trend here.
All right. Matt, back to you here for passing touchdowns on Jalen Hurts. His number is 1.5. And an over is plus 170. The under is minus 220. Again, the betting assumption is that the number is 1. So that's not an option here. I'm sure there's somewhere where the alt bet is available. But, I mean, 2 touchdowns does not seem like that much in the Super Bowl. It would be under the assumption that Philly cannot get in near the goal line, where Hurts fails near the goal line on the tush push, Barkley fails on the goal line, then it brings up a third down, maybe even a fourth. I don't know. This doesn't seem that bad for me at plus 170.
But and I've learned this from doing the show with Joe, passing touchdowns. We have 4 legs with which to compete. 2 of Hurts, 2 of Barkley in that type of situation. And Hurts' propensity to be able to run it in, and we have to pay attention to semantics. I'm a former teacher, the passing touchdowns. George is bringing it up. Where does it go? Does it go to Smith? Does it go to Goddard? Does it go to Brown? Does it go to Barkley?
Okay, Joe, over to you.
A lot more variance here, actually. In the last 10 games here for Jalen Hurts, 60% of the time he has actually gone under this number. And it's interesting because it's either 1 or 0. So 30% of the time, 1, 30%, 0, the other 40%, he actually hit this. He actually had 2 touchdowns. So it's not as crazy of an oppo bet, especially when you're considering the line you're getting, plus 170, almost 2-1. So yeah, it's actually within the realm of possibility and the range of outcomes that you can get this, but it's just really hard to invest in knowing what the identity of the Eagles has been. And I think at this point in time, you want to assert what you want to do as opposed to trying to change and adapt right now at this stage in the game. So I would still probably avoid this one altogether, but it's not as crazy as you might think when you start to look at the trend lines. It's actually something 40% of the time you are going to get over, and you are going to get 2 touchdowns from Jalen Hurts.
Okay, George, I'm going to go to you for 2 different bets here. The first one is, again, the passing touchdowns, 1.5 is plus money. Also, his interceptions to throw 1 in the game is also plus money because the number is a half, 0.5. Under is minus 160. Do you like the plus money on either of those?
I mean, you already know my game script. The 3 touchdowns for the Eagles, and I think Barkley and Hurts are getting 1 on the ground. So it means I think it's going to go under. So my head tells me the under, but I'm not betting minus 220. That's not happening. All right, there's too many props where I can get better numbers at, and I'm not positive about it. I don't feel great about it. If anything, and I have not done this yet, I'm seeing plus 180 now. I might go on the over here just in case I'm wrong about how the game script is, and I do get 2 passing touchdowns from Hurts. I'm going to take the great plus money, and that is a great price at plus 180. All right, so I don't mind taking the over there. It's contradicting how I think the game's going to go, but I'll play the plus money there. Do I think he throws an interception? Probably not. But that being said, all I need is 1 ball to go off someone's head, deflected off our receiver's hands here. It's picked off here. Once again, it's almost the same situation. You give me too good a price here. I'm not going to go the other way here and pay minus money. So I'll say yes, he does throw an interception. Maybe it's at the end of a half where he's throwing up a Hail Mary, I guess, here and see what happens here, and that gets picked off. So because of the good plus money, it's against my head because I don't think he really will here. But because of the good plus money, hey, you throw a $20 on it, something like that is probably what I'll end up doing.
All right, Matt, to you for Jalen Hurts' rushing yards in the game. Rushing yards, 36.5. These are always dangerous because 1 15, 20-yard run. If you bet the under, you're probably losing. If you bet the over, you're feeling really good about that. The health of Hurts has been in question. He's had 2 weeks now off. We're going to find out a lot more about Hurts' health. I don't want to revisit any discussion I had on the Super Bowl with Todd Gurley from a few years ago where they screwed us on all of his bets. I think, he's healthy. He's fine. He couldn't do squat. Hurts, I think, is healthier than Gurley, by the way, going into this game.
Yeah, and I just want to bring George. I teach my kids certain words. We don't throw away money. As wagers, we never want to throw away $20. I never want to normalize that speech ever. Now, with regards to the rushing prop for Jalen Hurts, I've learned from Joe, who's coaching his daughter's team, who actually in the Super Bowl today. Go Rams, right? As I understand it, the chaos works, movement and chaos works. So I think Hurts moving along with Barkley moving. I think Hurts is on the over here.
Over it is. All right, we'll take a quick break here on Fantasy Sports Today and come back with some major long shot possibilities to take a chance on. Would we take our hard-earned money, as Matt said, and not throw away $20? Next.
It's finally here. The big game is just days away, and SportsGrid is live from New Orleans all week long, bringing you the latest news, insights, and analysis from the biggest names in the game. And on game day, we've got you covered all day long with expert picks, live odds, and everything you need to make the most out of the biggest game of the year. Don't miss a second, and it's all happening only on SportsGrid.
Even the great Nick Saban had to put his team together to do it his way. We know Coach Ryan's coming in to come run the offense, who was his right-hand man, a good friend of his at UW. And, now he's coming in. Everything is going the way we want this thing to be. Coach DeBoer is a great recruiter. He's a great father of players. He's a great leader of men. He's going to do great.
Only on SportsGrid.
It was the greatest show ever. It's funny, and you know what I like? You have balls. I mean, the stuff you do on that show, you are half crazy.
I feel like a good sense of humor, and I like to show it off. And this kind of originally started where people were the hot dog eating challenge was something that I always wanted to do, and every 4th of July, and I was like, I could eat a ton of hot dogs.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back to Fantasy Sports today here on SportsGrid. Talk about long shots for the Super Bowl. Got some props to take a look at here, some Eagles specials. Maybe something like this comes in. You never know. I mean, it is, Super Bowl tends to be wild. Sometimes you have, punters throwing passes, quarterbacks catching passes. Remember the Eagles with the Philly special several years ago as well. Let's start off with a defensive one. And George, I'll pique your interest because it sounds like you have the most down on this already as far as the number of bets. Eagles to record 5.5 sacks, plus 270. We kind of feel like the Eagles probably have a chance to sack the quarterback. We talked about Carter maybe gaining 1 or 2, or he even knows this is plus 270, George. Do you think that the Eagles could get 5+ sacks? That's a big number.
That's a huge number. I'm on over 3.5, so I think they're close. All right, I think they're really close. I don't think that Kansas City offensive line is all that good. Guys, when have we ever had a Super Bowl, or really, even a regular season game where we're not sure who's playing left tackle? Maybe it's Thune, maybe it's not. It's almost like it's a competitive thing, like, let's see what Andy Reid does here. This is unheard of. All right, that offensive line is average at best, and I'm not even sure it's average. I think Philadelphia's almost licking their chops, wanting to go at the Mahomes. I wonder how Andy Reid's going to protect Holmes. Is he going to, once again, scramble out to the left, scramble out to the right, move the pocket? Are they going to go double tight end set to give extra protection there? I don't mind this bet. I can't tell you it's going to hit. I'm on over 3.5. I told you before, I like Jalen Carter to get a sack here. So I think this is in the realm of possibility. I do think it should be a better number than 270. I mean, you're talking 6 sacks here?
It seems like a lot to only have. I agree. It seems like a lot, Joe, to only have plus 270 on this. I mean, I don't know what the record is. Maybe one of you guys can Google that real quick in a game. I'm guessing 8 sacks is the most ever. I mean, that's a guess. I don't know.
Well, it's funny. So Mahomes actually been sacked 5 times twice this season. He also had 36 total sacks this year. So that's just thing. It's not quite as impossible to think about what that might be. I'm looking for the individual sack leaders here in a Super Bowl. Darnell Dockett had 3 by himself one year. Most sacks in Super Bowl by a player is 3. So Grady Jarrett had it. Reggie White also had it against New England years ago in his big Super Bowl. But the Rams recorded 7, it looks like, in 2022. The Denver Broncos, 7 in Super Bowl 50. And the Chicago Bears also 7 in the, of course, 1985 Bears defense. So I don't know if the Eagles are quite the 85 Bears, but it's not impossible. And Mahomes has it that number of 5 at least twice in this season. But I'm with you. I'm probably fading this one. But interesting that the plus money isn't more like a 5-1. That would be a little bit more intriguing.
Yeah, Matt, seems like a lot of sacks, right, for this?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you're off it, but I think we have to take away this is since you can't seemingly breathe on Mahomes, all you need is one. And you bury your helmet in between the 1 and the 5 as hard as you possibly can. I don't care how many flags fall upon you. That's just my take. Greg?
All right. Let's take a look at another one. Philadelphia's defense to score a touchdown, George. Plus 650. Wow. That's a big number if that hits, George.
Yeah, right now the Referees Association is calling Matt right now to throw a flag on you, even mentioning Pat Mahomes getting hit. Dude, this cannot happen. It's not allowed. It's just the defense, not the special teams. It's the defense. I mean, there's no numbers I can throw you out here. All right, this is if you feel it's going to happen, fine. This is what did Matt say about throwing away money? This is probably the definition of that. All right, do you want to throw $10 at it? Hey, let's see what happens. $20, fine. But I can't tell you that, oh, this is going to hit and feel good about it. This is one. Hey, it's last game of the season. Let's have some fun. But no, I don't think this happens.
Joe,
I think if it happens here, it's a backbreaker. For sure, because Mahomes has thrown 5 picks 5 picks, 8 touchdowns in his career in the Super Bowl. So it's not an impossibility that Patrick Mahomes throws a touchdown. Now, throws an interception, whether that goes for a touchdown, that is one that really could sway this game. And that would, I think, be a huge difference if we're talking about this game being so tight. And Jalen Hurts on the other side, the reason I think this is probably a bad bet too, is he doesn't throw enough, right? So if you're looking you need big, high volume kind of gunslingers, I think, to get into this range for this kind of stuff to happen. So if it happens to somebody, it would happen to Mahomes. So the Eagles side is where I might want to be on this one because of the kind of defense they play too. Maybe you get to the quarterback and knock that ball loose from Mahomes too. He's trying too hard to make a play. You could see that scenario. So I actually like this a little bit more on the Eagles side than I would on the Chiefs side. But again, I think this is more of a fade, but a fun one.
Okay. And finally, Joe, let's go back to you for this one. The Eagles win. That's about plus 110. The Eagles win in overtime is 17-1. Wow. I mean, seems like there's a pretty big disparity with how close the game could be. But, range of outcomes here is so significant. And boy, if this game goes to overtime, that's where I'm counting on the Chiefs kicker at that point. Like, that's where I think that becomes a factor.
Exactly.
So I really just don't like this one.
And I think that's why we're getting this plus 1,700 because the concern about Jake Elliott being able to convert that big, high pressurized kick. We got our first overtime Super Bowl just last year. Could we do back-to-back? Maybe. I mean, it's not impossible. If we all think these teams are close and Vegas says this is within a point, well, why can't they be tied? Why can't this be another overtime and a very dramatic ending to that game? But I'm with you, Craig. If it gets to that point, it might be worthy of looking at maybe the Harrison Butker side of that one. However, if you bet it now plus 1,700, I wonder if they offer you a cash out option when it goes to overtime, and you can still make money on this anyway. Just an idea.
Possibly, Matt. 17-1. That's a big fat number for that to end up happening. Joe mentioned we got an overtime game last year. I don't know. Does it seem far fetched to think we could get this 2 years in a row?
I'm sorry, did you say far-fetched? Have we all not been alive for the last 10 years with regards to far-fetched? Here's the thing. Everyone says Chiefs get the benefit of the whistle. Some people even go as far as to say it's all scripted. Well, how about this? How about the Eagles come back and they win it in overtime? That'll shut down that whole scripted talk right away. So, yeah, I like that. Remember, it's that
17-1. Wow. Yeah. George, we'll close with you.
Once again, it's a fun bet. There's not much analytics here. I think it is going to be a close game, though, so why not? I wouldn't put significant money on this. This is another $10, $20 bet here. I have not done it yet. Maybe I will, maybe I won't in the next, 8.5 hours here. But it is. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, so I don't mind this.
All right, fair enough. 17-1. If that's what you're interested in, we'll be back and wrap up this second hour of Fantasy Sports Today next.
even the great Nick Saban had to put his team together to do it his way. We know Coach Ryan's coming in to come run the offense, who was his right-hand man, a good friend of his at UW. And, now he's coming in. Everything is going the way we want this thing to be. Coach DeBoer is a great recruiter. He's a great father of players. He's a great leader of men. He's going to do great.
Only on SportsGrid.
But don't tell anybody. I'm sick of coming here every year and talking about the Kansas City Chiefs.
Look, remember a few years ago we were here, people saying, Andy Reid's going to retire. I'm like, no way. When you're riding Seabiscuit, Secretariat, when you're riding a horse that you know can win, who would jump off that?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
My mom, she was a professional ballet dancer. My aunt played professional tennis. My dad played football at Pitt when they won a national championship. My sister ran track at Stanford. So it's just kind of in my blood to love all sports. And so I've always obviously loved golf, but it's been nice to kind of branch out a little bit more and get into different sports and different topics and not just always do golf.
Only on SportsGrid.
All right, we're going to wrap up this hour of the show before we get to some Chiefs props as we put a bow, as they say, on the Philadelphia Eagles. Craig Mish, Joe Pisapia, George Kurtz, and Matt Stryker, thanks so much for tuning into the show this morning. Happy Super Bowl Sunday. All right, guys, let's do it real quick. A.J. Brown broke out last week in a big way. His receptions totals is at 5.5 plus 105. The under is minus 135. And Matt, I'll start with you. 70.5 receiving yards. Total is 115 on the money line. The under is minus 110. Does A.J. Brown go over or under on receptions and over or under on receiving yards? This number was 60 in the NFC Championship. It's now 70 in the Super Bowl.
Yep. And I'm glad that you put them together because it allows us to have a bigger discussion. It's what Joe and I like to do each and every Sunday morning. Generally in the season, when Brown goes over this reception number of 5.5, he flirts with or surpasses 100 yards, right? It's 96, 97, 101, 103. So if you think he is going over the reception, you couple it with going over the receiving yards and try to find a better number. I do believe, like I said, if he finds himself in some favorable man coverage, that he can exploit that. But how quickly does the other team make the adjustment? So I'll run with this and put them together and try to find a good number, Craig.
All right, George, it's a big number compared to what it was a week ago, but Brown had a big game, and so that's the reaction here.
Yeah, I've already said several times, I don't think Brown has a big game today. I just don't. I think McDuffie is going to be on him, or maybe they do bracket him. I don't think they bracket him. I don't think they can afford to do that with Barkley running the football. So I think it's going to be McDuffie trying to keep him in check here. I lean the under for Brown here. I'm not betting Brown. I mentioned I have no props for Brown, which is really amazing when I think about it. I can tell you on my book, though, they changed it. It's 4.5 receptions, but it's minus 168. 69.5 is for the yardage there. Minus 168 would never. I like the over, but I'm not betting minus 168.
All right, Joe, you like anything on Brown?
No, and to tell you the truth, I'm stay away on Smith too. I think both of these guys. We're talking about these kind of props, right? If anything, maybe we're fading towards the under just a tad, but I keep coming back to that same number of Jalen Hurts passing yardage, right? So where does that go to? If it's well under that 211 or 213, whatever that number is, whatever book you're getting, it's going to be sparing at times. So I think this is more like throwing darts and saying, okay, maybe one of them has that breakout moment, right? But it's really tough, especially when you look at the game log. It's a little all over the place for especially Smith. So maybe you're better off just trying to bet one of them to score a touchdown and hoping you're right as that quote unquote other touchdown we're looking for in this game, as George was talking about. I would stick to what we know is going to happen. And what we know is Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, they're going to have the ball in their hands in this game. And I think they're easier to invest in because of that.
All right. So Devonta Smith, real quick, Joe, 50.5 on the receiving yards, 4.5 on the receptions. You're out on these two.
Anytime touchdown plus 230. That's because at the end of the day, I think that's your best return on this. Everything else is probably more of a fade to the under. I will say with the 4.5 receptions, I would probably lean towards the under on this one too. AJ Brown, I think the yardage total maybe is that one big play, so you can get it all in one spot there with the over. Those would be my two best from these two wide receivers, but it is really tough because you just don't have a lot of volume to work with, which means these guys are going to have to thread needles on all these props.
George, one big catch for Smith puts him over. The reception's a little bit of a different story.
Agree there. I'm on the over for the yardage there. I think he's going to be a bigger part of this game plan. I mentioned Devonta Smith against this type of defense that the Kansas City Chiefs run. Generally, he crushes it. I do agree that the volume's not going to be there. They're not going to throw the ball 40 times. I don't think they will be. But that being said, I think he gets this. I think he gets this kind of easily as far as the yardage. Reception is going to be a little tougher.
All right, Matt, take us home.
Yep, I just think you need to involve the entire team. You need to throw everything at the Chiefs. So when we're all sitting here saying, yeah, I don't see this, I don't see that, that's where this team, that's where Sirianni and his boys are going to throw some of the chicanery, the tomfoolery, the skullduggery, if you will. Okay?
Yeah. Really interesting story developed this morning, too, by the way, reported on ESPN as we close out our discussion on the Eagles. It looks like, according to ESPN, Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator of the Eagles, ends up being the head coach of the Saints maybe as soon as tomorrow. I am not going to put this story in the category of anything that happened with the Falcons in the past on the eve of the Super Bowl, or even put it on the Raiders on the eve of the Super Bowl. But at the timing, I will say, a little unusual here for Philadelphia going into their game today with the media knowing and the public knowing that this is potentially the last game Kellen Moore plays for the Eagles before he takes a job with the Saints. So that could be a storyline as well. Coming up next, though, we pivot over to the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll talk about passing or smashing on some anytime touchdowns. Don't go on.
Let's talk about Philly and Kansas City. They're here again 2 out of the last 3 years. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
I'm a big Andy Reid fan, and it's hard to go against what he's been able to accomplish. Okay. That being said, there's a lot of storylines in this game. You look at Saquon and what he's been able to do this year.
Crazy.
It's wild. But if he's able to do what he's done throughout the playoffs, they'll be hard to beat.
Only on SportsGrid.
You want me to solve all this tush-push and fourth down malarkey that goes on with the officials? Here's the crazy idea. Get rid of the worst rule in the NFL, and that is forward progress. How about this? Where I knock your ass in the ground is where the ball goes, period. Let's end this whole conversation. Like, if I drop you back 4 yards, then you lost 4 yards. If we get rid of forward progress, this tush-push and everything else is taken care of. Where I put your tail on the ground is where the ball goes. End of conversation. It's the dumbest rule and the most arbitrary rule. The only thing that is a worse call in the NFL than forward progress is the punt that goes out of bounds when you watch the official walk down the sideline having absolutely no clue where that ball crossed over. All I can think of is that Price is Right game go do-de-do-de-do, do-de-do-de-do, as he's walking down the sideline, arbitrarily trying to figure out where the ball crossed over because he's got no clue.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.